United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 1 is approval of the agenda,
I'll move approval.
and I will second it, and that means everyone's in favor. Motion carries. Item 2, public comment on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move forward to approval of the March 15th, 2018 meeting minutes,
I'll move approval of those minutes.
and I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Here, no opposed. Motion carries. Report out on closed session from the March 26th meeting and today's meeting.
I can't tell if my mic is on.
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, the board met in a special closed session meeting held on March 26th to confer with legal counsel regarding litigation that was identified on that agenda, and no action was taken at that meeting. The board also met in closed session this morning to confer with legal counsel on a piece of litigation identified on the closed session agenda, and the board met consulting authority counsel. The board also had a conference with its real property negotiator in closed session this morning, and no action was taken.
Thank you. Item 5, monthly revenue and expense report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and member of the board. This month summarizes revenue and expenses for February 2018. The agency's starting cash position in funds 870 and 871 was approximately $1.9 million. We received a significant true-up from DWR on both the construction side and the real estate payment, 7.7 for quarter 26 true-up and $3.5 million for the fourth real estate true-up. That was a total of about $11.2 million. Expenses were light because we still haven't moved into major construction season this month, and those amounts were about $178,000, and we had the first distribution to the maintaining agencies relative to the first installment of the flood assessment for $352,000. The ending cash position or total expenses for the month were $561,000, and the ending cash position in 870 and 871 was $12.6 million. The 7.7 on the quarter 26 true-up came from 257. We moved the money from 257 to 871, so that dropped the amount of money in 257 to $10.6 million approximately, bringing the agency's cash position for February, overall cash position, to $23.2 million. Past February, up to this month, we've received GO&A payments from the state. We finally resolved a methodology that was acceptable to both sides, and we received $568,000 for work that was done far in the early stages of the program back in 2008, 9, and 10. So that was good. And then we also trued up some ICAP expenses for $442,000. So that was about $1 million that they've moved back to us. On the North area projects, the records of survey are being reviewed by Yolo County. We expect to have their input on those results by the end of the month, and that'll inform our monumentation. And once the monumentation is there, that's the last physical activity we have to do on those North area projects. And I think we've gotten all the documentation they need to review and finally close out the design and construction elements of the North area project. So that'll be a nice chunk of money as well when that gets in. And we're expecting to do that with luck by the end of the year, fiscal year. The very last effort will be to do a staff report to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and transfer the rights we've acquired to the SSJDD. They're also helping us, DWR is also helping us throughput cost share on the CCON settlement. So we've given them the preliminary court documents rather than record documents, and they're using that for the basis to do a calculation and get us some money for that. And the next advance is modeled right now for May, approximately $13.9 million to help fuel up our construction season. And that ends the report for February.
Just a little more detail on that CCON request, reimbursement. Would it be a preliminary amount you'd get, and then it would go?
Yeah, it would be a 50% state cost share. We're also working, Paul's also pushing the final accounting package through on the real estate branch side. So if that catches up to it, I think we can get up to like 80% of state cost share on it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you very much. On to the consent items. Is there any questions or anything that we have special look at? If not, I would make a motion to move the consent agenda as presented.
And I'll second that.
It's been first and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, motion carries. Item 10, update on the Pioneer Bluff and Stone Lock reuse master plan. Katie.
Is that on? There we go. Okay, good. Pardon me. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to present a more in-depth dive in to the informational item that we presented to the board at the last meeting where we shared the draft findings from the bulkhead analysis report. This report will go over that in kind of greater detail, as well as we attached to the staff report the Stone Lock facility reuse strategy that was prepared by Jacobs. Jacobs is a sub-consultant to Pros Consulting, who is the consultant who's preparing the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. So this is a coordinated effort with the Parks Department as they're updating that document. So this is an opportunity for the board to see how flood protection and recreation and open space have an opportunity to converge and merge together. So as a reminder, the reuse master plan covers Pioneer Bluff and Stone Lock. It's an expansion of a council-approved document that was approved in 2014, the Pioneer Bluff Transition Plan. It's not a specific plan. There's no CEQA attached to this document. It is an advisory document that contains recommendations and due diligence on a variety of topics that were addressed in the Pioneer Bluff Transition Plan. So it's sort of the first bite at the apple. It's the first next step in transitioning Pioneer Bluff and Stone Lock. And it must be approved by the city council by July. Otherwise, I'm in default of my grant deadline. This was the recommended open space trails and parks vision that was conceptually approved by our Parks Commission and the City Council. And this reflects sort of a revisioning of the Central Park concept. The Central Park concept in the 2003 Parks Master Plan basically had all of Stone Lock as a park. This was a re-envisioned interpretation of that in light of the general plan update that occurred in 2016, which had a tremendous amount of development expected in Stone Lock. So those were in conflict. We believe this vision has reconciled that. You recognize this slide from the informational presentation. We informed the WSAFCA board last month that we looked at other alternatives to what was approved in the general reevaluation report and another alternative that was looked at in the alternatives analysis report. We identified 2 additional flood protection solutions for this area that we think better align with the work that's being done by Jacobs and Pros, by the Parks Department, and in coordination with the Pioneer Bluff Reuse Master Plan. So with that, I thought I'd walk you through the work that's been done to date and kind of give you an overview of what's in those 2 documents. And then I'll close it out with sort of what the next steps are and how Greg and I will continue to coordinate, and eventually I will pass the baton of this work over to Greg to sort of to carry it home, so to speak. So there were 3 things that we looked at in the evaluation criteria. We looked at flood risk reduction and system resiliency, and we really focused on whether the proposed solution provided 200-year or 500-year level of flood protection, what the ongoing operation and maintenance was of that proposed alternative, and then how compatible was it with the reuse master plan, i.e. also the parks and open space master plan. We looked at 6 criteria to identify its compatibility: water quality, fish passage, ecosystem enhancement, they're up there, you can see what they are. And I'm going to walk you through what each of those different categories meant and how we either measured them through quantifiable measurements or qualitatively how we measured them. But first, I'll walk you through the different solutions. So this was the retrofit of the bulkhead. This was analyzed in the alternatives analysis report that at the time that it was done, it assumed that the retrofit of the bulkhead structure would be $2.5 million. And it would offer a 200-year level of flood protection. We did some materials testing that was recommended in that technical memo that was completed in 2016 by Wood Rogers. We followed up on the materials testing. We had divers go out and do an assessment of the bulkhead, looked at the debris that was sort of clogging up the works out there, and we were able to lower that cost to $800,000. So for $800,000, it would fix the freeboard deficiencies that are out there that surround it. The bulkhead itself, the stop logs, do provide 200-year, but there are freeboard deficiencies around it. So for $800,000, we would resolve that. We would take the stop logs out. We would remove the debris, and we would seat them properly. Right now, they're not sealed. They're not seating properly, so water is leaking through. And to do that on a regular basis, the cost in $2008 is a little over $430,000 per year to take them out, inspect them, make sure they're seated properly, and remove the debris. That's alternative 1. Alternative 2 is to construct a new flood barrier. This is a new alternative that was considered in this report. It provides 500-year level of protection. It has 4 48-inch culverts at the base of it to allow water to flow and potentially to allow fish to pass. The construction estimate is a little over $10 million, and to turn the culverts on and off effectively is about $65,000 per year. It also has the same freeboard improvements that are necessary as the previous alternative. And this is a rendering of what that might look like. You can see a bridge has been incorporated onto the top of it, so it also offers some additional connectivity opportunities with it. We also looked at the GRR solution, both with and without culverts inside of it. The current solution does not include those culverts. It's estimated to cost a little over $43 million. Annual O&M is $12,000. It does offer 500-year level of protection. If we add the culverts in, it goes up about another $1.5 million, and the operating and maintenance expenses are almost $50,000. And again, that's for maintenance of those culverts that are there. And then the last solution that we looked at is a retrofit of the actual sector gate. So the sector gate is the gate that was used for lockage. If we retrofit the gate and increase the height of the gate, that would mean taking off the catwalks and adding additional steel. That would also offer 500-year level of protection, and it's estimated to cost about $4 million to raise the sector gate. And we would have to re-electrify the sector gate. Right now, there's no electricity going to it. It doesn't work. Someone pulled out all of the electrical conduit. We would have to re-electrify it. We'd have to restore the command building that's located adjacent to it to get it working again. And then the estimated cost for O&M is about $150,000 per year, and we would have to have somebody who would operate that facility. So those are the 4 alternatives, 4 and 5. There's a variation on the GRR that we looked at. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the various different compatibilities, sort of the co-benefits that we looked at. So bear with me, it gets a little sciencey here. But we looked at 3 metrics of water quality. We looked at salinity, we looked at dissolved oxygen, and we looked at chlorophyll, so algae blooms. We looked at algae blooms that were occurring there. And you can see that the darker blue are figures from 2015. The lighter blue are figures from 2017. And effectively what this is telling us is that the leakage that occurred during the high water events that happened in 2017, and you can see that leakage in this picture here, radically changed the water quality in the barge canal. This data was provided by the USGS, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation Science Division has been collecting data in the Deepwater Ship Channel since 2012, and they shared this data with us. And we immediately looked at this data and understood that even just a small amount of leakage changes the water quality in the Deepwater Ship Channel. Fish passage is another issue that we looked at. The report that I'm preparing for the reuse master plan requires that I look at habitat restoration or enhancement qualities. It happens that in 1996, when the Army Corps of Engineers looked at decommissioning the locks facility, they also identified fish passage as an issue. Apparently fish were getting through during normal lockage, and if the lockage was ceasing to occur, there was a major concern that migrating fish that were coming up the Deepwater Ship Channel would not be able to make it into the Sacramento River. I provided you a quote from that report. So they recommended that we either look at modifying the lock operations to act as a fish lift, or that we construct a fish ladder. I had Wood Rogers do a cost estimate for constructing a fish ladder, which they thought would be advisable since that could operate in high water events versus using the lock to operate during high water events would be discouraged. And they estimate that that'd be a little over $10 million to construct a fish ladder along the southern edge of the lock facility. Ecosystem enhancement. We've been working with the Bureau of Reclamation Science Division with a scientist there who has hypothesized that the Deepwater Ship Channel could be used to grow fish food for the Delta smelt. What you're looking at here and the things you want to focus on are this WSP line that's right next to the bulkhead. We have trapped water. We have water that gets into the barge canal area. It doesn't move. We all know that. And at the same time, because nutrients and fresh water are leaking in from the Sacramento River, you also have and this is phytoplankton and this is zooplankton, so fish food. You have a tremendous amount of blooms occurring for both of these, and they're sitting in trapped water. They hypothesize that if we could create a sufficient enough velocity to push these fish food down into the delta, that we could actually help the delta smelt, and that they also hypothesize that we could artificially create this, which is happening naturally. They think that we could artificially create blooms farther down the Deepwater Ship Channel, so where we already see brackish water occurring, where water movement's already occurring, so in this zone of mixing, that they could seed it with the necessary things to grow the fish food and then open up the gates and push that down. And so they think that they could get between 3 to 4 blooms per season and grow fish food, and that would increase the amount of fish food that's occurring in the Deepwater Ship Channel like 3 to 4 times. So this opening up, providing this passage of water creates this potential to grow fish food in the Deepwater Ship Channel, and this would be compatible with maritime activities. This is the revised Central Park concept. This has not gone to our city council yet, but it has been to our Parks Commission for review and consideration. This is that diagram that I showed you earlier, sort of with all of the programming that's recommended. It also incorporated in the old switching yard, the existing switching yard, which hopefully will become an old switching yard once rail relocation occurs. So it assumes that which is currently owned by the port would be turned into a park. And so this is the city's new Central Park. I'm going to show you the next diagram, which is the recreational opportunities for what we call the Stonelock Plaza. So it's the area that's immediately adjacent to this bulkhead. There is an opportunity for us to retrofit 4 out of the 5 buildings. Wood Rogers has done a structural assessment of the 4 buildings that we're looking to remain, and it's about $4 million to bring those up to code and get those structurally retrofitted. So I think that's a reasonable cost to consider, saving those 4 structures out there. Jacobs presumed that the Watchtower building that's on Jefferson could be converted into an interpretive center for historic preservation purposes, for talking about the ecological benefits of the recommended alternatives that are in the bulkhead report. So this is also provided in your attachment. And then this is the programming that's assumed for the structure. So you can see it incorporates a lot of green space. This reflects the building setbacks that were done by Wood Rogers as well. So it has, the buildings have been retrofitted. We're incorporating splash parks and other park features, a plaza, et cetera. So you can see that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to create an urban park around the Stonelock facility, and the areas that you see in the kind of that pale yellow are development sites. And so the expectation is that if this is done very well, that there would be a premium attached to being immediately adjacent to these facilities. And so those are sort of that's the culmination. And then one of the issues that Jacobs identified, which is although you're near the water, you can't really engage with the water. And so they recommended that we look at incorporating either into the flood protection feature or into the barge canal itself, these water features that would allow people to actually engage with the water, since the water is in many cases, 20 feet below where you'd actually be standing with the bulkhead. So I think that's it. Okay, so moving on to the table that you saw before, I made some minor adjustments to it last time. The two that you see highlighted in orange, that is what Wood Rogers is recommending that we pursue and incorporate into the reuse master plan. The work that Jacobs did assumed that one of these two alternatives would be the ultimate flood protection solution that would be occurring at the bulkhead. Both of these support all of the recreational benefits, all of the historic preservation benefits, all of the ecosystem enhancement, water quality, fish passage benefits that are out there. And I'll let you go ahead and pause and take a minute to absorb that, that performance summary that was provided in the report as well. And then this is what you might get if we pull it off. This is a rendering of the Stone Lock facility. It incorporates the fish ladder, the building setbacks, little things like there's a little ramp here that you can see that for getting the crane down if you need to access the bulkhead. Again, the bulkhead structure remains safely stored away. There's a new bridge that's contemplated. If we did the flood wall, that bridge would live on top of that flood wall. This is an example of what it's possible that Stone Lock and Pioneer Bluff could look like in the future. So the next steps, we have a public open house on May 8th, and that invitation is going out on social media. We're going to be workshopping these concepts to the Planning Commission on the 17th, 2 stops at the City Council to discuss everything that the document contains, and then hopefully the council will consider approval on June 27th. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I should also mention, just in passing, that there are other considerations that are in the document that have to do with issues like related to seepage and water diversion and sedimentation. If you're looking for an in-depth report on any of that, I'd be happy to invite Wood Rogers back to talk about that in greater detail, but I really wanted to just focus this presentation on how this solution works its way into the reuse master plan and the ultimate potential reuse strategy for Stone Lock. So I'm happy to take any questions, or I'm sure Greg is happy to take any questions if you have them on the work that we've been doing. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation. I feel fortunate to get a preview before my colleagues, so I appreciate that.
Sure.
I think I asked this last time. I just want to make, with my WSAFCA hat on.
Sure.
If we were to go with the alternative that is not in the GRR, that does not, I'm really concerned about the effects on projects and longer term with the WSAFCA hat on. So if we chose something different, oh, be careful, Greg. What'd you do? Oh, no.
So, we could move forward with a solution other than what's contained in the GRR in a couple different ways. One would be through the course of an authorized project with the Army Corps of Engineers, we could provide information to them on specific alternatives that we would like to carry forward, and especially if there's a cost savings and it provides equal to or greater flood protection. I don't see this as being in conflict with what the authorized plan is. Okay. It's more of a design refinement. So I think it'll be okay that way. The other way, if we were to move forward, another alternative might be to move forward ahead of the Corps or in parallel with other things that they're doing, and do this either as a project partnership agreement where we might carry the work forward, we might do it under Section 408. I mean, there's a variety of ways that we could, maybe not a variety, a couple of alternatives that we could do to move this forward in advance of or in parallel with the work that this Corps is doing. So I think there's options on how we might move this forward,
Okay.
as well as the timing.
Yeah, because, I mean, clearly, that's why I'm sure they're coming forward, is the 2 and 4 alternatives both give 500-year flood protection, which are both, they're equal to what the GRR solutions were, or suggestions, and then they're much less expensive. So that has I mean, 3.9 million versus 44.9 is a big
Yeah.
differential. And I mean, we have to be concerned with the cost as well as the O&M costs. So I do think I think you've landed on the best ones to bring forward in terms of the flood protection that they will provide as well as the cost.
Yeah. I should mention, I did do a present day value calculation on the O&M
Okay,
costs for
okay.
100 years, and I didn't want to bring, it's a big spreadsheet, but I did look at sort of what assuming that, rate of inflation is 3% and that, there's 6% return on an investment that we put in, so, what we need to put into a savings account today
Right.
in order to have 100 years worth of protection, and both of those two alternatives still are the lowest, some of
Okay.
the lowest cost ones. The flood protection solution, the retrofit of the bulkhead does come out as being near the cost of the new flood wall. They're roughly about the same. They're about 12.5 million when you add in O&M costs, the present day value for 100 years worth of operations. But alternative 4 still remains the most cost effective at about $8.5 million with that O&M calculation in there for present day value. So I think both of those recommendations are solid in terms of even with the O&M expenses taken into consideration.
Okay. And then my final one, and then.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
A few of us in the room just got back from Cap to Cap late last night, and while I didn't meet with Congressman Garamendi, some of my colleagues did, and he continues to bring up an idea about using the port kind of as a throughput.
For water conveyance.
Yes, the deep water ship channel. How are we going to stay on top of, I mean, this project we need this, and I just don't know how we manage all of that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that I think part of the reason why we're keeping alternative 2 in there is that that alternative is clearly not sized for water conveyance, yet it is sized for freshening the deep water ship channel, and it does incorporate, in both cases, we incorporated the fish ladder as an assumption, so that regardless of what we decide to go with, that we could say, okay, let's size down those culverts, let's just look at what the velocity is needed. So in alternative 2, for example, we size those culverts assuming that fish and water would be moving through them. If we decide we just want to move enough water to flush the deep water ship channel and to work with our partners over at the science division who want to grow the fish food, we look at the velocity for that. We size those culverts for just that, and we build the fish ladder. I think it still achieves everything that we want to achieve and keeps us out of that issue with the water conveyance. So that was part of the reason why we included alternative 2 as having merit as well, and that it has an easier O&M obligation attached to it. So I think we're cognizant of that issue moving forward, and so there is some reticence with alternative 4 in relationship to that, and also in relationship to the O&M obligation. So I think that is certainly something we need to look into further, but I believe that alternative 2 does allow us to right size the culverts so we don't find ourselves in that situation if that's what we choose to not find ourselves in that situation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. This is exciting. It's much better than what's in the GRR, in my opinion. So I hope we keep moving forward and we find one of these alternatives that works. Just kind of a couple questions. The west sector gates, some of the alternatives, obviously, they are not a factor at all and will just be closed. Are there any of the factors, like the one where we use the east sector gates, where those would come into play too and need to be operational?
So the east sector gate is what would be retrofitted
Right.
for alternative 4. In all of the alternatives, we assume that the west sector gates are rolled back manually and left in
place.
Left in place, yes. Although there has been some discussion about leaving them in the closed position for just like a backup, flood protection alternative. Although that is for aesthetic purposes, that was not recommended by our Parks and Recreational consultant. They said open them up so people, if they wanted to kayak in, they could do that. So I think that's another thing that we would need to sort of iron out the details on in terms of what is the balance between recreation abilities to get into the lock facility with non-motorized watercraft versus is there a legitimate flood protection benefit of keeping them in place.
Okay.
keeping them in place. I would mention that if they are in place, then the fish ladder does have to go all the way
Oh, yeah.
to the other side, versus if they're rolled back, then the fish ladder is a more compact facility, and the cost estimate that I provided of $10 million is that more compact facility, and assumes that the western gates are open and the fish are making their way in to the barge canal, into the lock facility, and then they're climbing the fish ladder just to get around the one gate or the one wall.
Okay, and then that fish ladder alternative would allow fish passages at times of year when there's high flows in the river, whatnot.
Yes.
I know we're very preliminary, but that's an assumption, the cost of $10.3 million, that's in addition to the cost for the new bulkhead wall.
Because that is not a flood
Right,
protection feature,
right.
it's separate, yes.
There should be many opportunities for people to partner with us on that, I would assume.
I believe that the interest in this is already being spoken about by other people.
Okay.
I had a conversation with Tim Washburn yesterday. I believe he's already started, talking about this project, and I informed him that maybe Greg needed to be in those meetings. So, but yeah, I believe that there's a tremendous amount of interest in this.
There's all kinds of work being done in the bypasses and other places to develop this fish food idea, and, as an alternative just to unimpaired flows down the river, and how beneficial are they without bringing in these other components. So I think there's many opportunities to partner with a lot of folks on on how we get this, and even O&M operations going forward down the road. So I think it's a great ideas, and keep going.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're on to the project report.
Thank you, Chair Ramos, members of the board. Just go over a couple of highlights from the progress report, and then at the end of my report, maybe we'll go into a little bit of some of the meetings that took place back in Cap to Cap. For the Southport project, we're in the middle of construction season now. Prior to this meeting, we had received a couple of different time variance requests that were granted by the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. So the contractor was able to go out and do some preliminary work, no major construction. The items are listed in your report there. Material sampling of the existing levee, some miscellaneous demolition activities, degrading of adjacent landside, roads and driveway connections, some roadway milling, and also some setback levee grading and associated tie-in work. As we go into the construction season, then things are going to start ramping up significantly. Also, South River Road from Locks Drive to the Yacht Club has been closed, and now access to the marinas and the remaining segment of South River Road is via a temporary access road that was constructed by the contractor on the North Village Parkway access road. On the federal project side of things, hot off the presses this morning from the district, Division has completed their review of the economic package. It's waiting signature from the chief of planning. Although the ink isn't dry yet, the word is that the metrics have not changed. Everything remains the same as was completed with the agency technical review, and so we should be seeing that letter within the next week or so. Then it's almost a formality where the district then is the last signature, the district commander, and then that becomes where we are with our 2.2 BCR.
That's good, because we're throwing that number around all over town.
Yeah, and
Right.
so is the Corps as well.
Right.
So, on the Deepwater Ship Channel East Drainage Repair Project, all of the executed contracts been returned, all the insurance documents have been reviewed and approved. The notice to proceed will be issued shortly. A pre-construction conference is scheduled for next week. And following that, the contractor is going to start working on project submittals, material procurement plans, construction staging, and we're still anticipating construction to begin in June. And then I think we're finally going to be able to remove this from the progress report, the Sac Bank setback levee project. The The Corps has finally accepted the project and turned over O&M to RD 900. So that project is finally closed out. I don't know, though, if they've updated the O&M manual.
They did.
Okay, so it has been updated. I think that's what we were waiting for, actually, in order for them to turn it over to RD 900. And that really is all I wanted to point out within the progress report. Any questions about anything else there before we talk about cap to cap?
Just, you said South Bank will come off. That South Cross Levy certification, that letter's been circulated to the Corps for a long time. but-
Yeah, I noticed that. I didn't want to talk about it. Yeah,
Oh,
that
well.
one, that one should also come off as well.
Okay.
Okay, so cap to cap, we just returned from a 3-day stint, and there were a number of meetings that the flood team attended. The assignments that this group had included the Army Corps of Engineers, both headquarters and ASA, Congressman Tim McClintock, a House Appropriations Committee on Energy and Water, Congressman Amibera, Congresswoman Doris Matsui, National Waterways Conference, Office of Management and Budget, Senate Appropriations Committee, Subcommittee on Energy and Water Development, and Senator Harris' staff. I had the pleasure of joining the mayor and meeting with the ASA's office at Army Corps headquarters. The meeting was, it was a good meeting, and we had, actually had the gentleman that we met with actually worked on our project in leading up to the Civil Works Review Board. And so was familiar with the project, although it had been a few years, and so we were able to share where we were with advancing the Southport project, how that is part of the federal project, the new metrics. He was aware of the new metrics on the BCR. And so we continue to get support from that office. Couldn't provide any insight on the fiscal year 18 work plan or the supplemental appropriations budget, aware that they're going on, but couldn't provide any details as to when we might expect those to come out. But all in all, it was a good meeting. Also met with the Congresswoman Doris Matsui, Congresswoman, and she's just a tremendous supporter for all the flood projects in the region, including WSAC. And she did most of the talking, letting us know where we were and what we could expect. She also is anxiously awaiting the supplemental, both the supplemental appropriations as well as the work plan, and is optimistic that we'll receive funding for our project. So it's always good to meet with her, and she continues to be a strong project advocate for us. The National Waterways Conference, I thought, was one of the most informative meetings that I think we all attended, or the three of us anyways were able to attend. And I think that it may be beneficial for the agency to consider becoming a member of that and participating. They are significantly involved in water-related legislation, as well as activities by the Corps and others that we track, and they're on top of flood project legislation, FEMA, WRDA bills, and so I think that would be, we want to consider that, and if the board so directs, I can bring something back with the budget update in June to perhaps add an item for membership. I'll take a look at what the membership fee is, and we can bring that back if that's something the board would like. Also met with the Office of Management and Budget, with a gentleman that's been with that office and with the Corps for many decades. Gary Waxman's his name, and again, aware of our project. He took a tour in California a couple of years ago, but unfortunately his tour was cut a little bit short, and so he was unable to tour the future side of our setback levy project. There wouldn't have been much to see out there, but he could have envisioned. So we extended another invitation, should he like to come out again and take a look at the progress in action. Again, he's aware of our project, he's aware of what we're constructing. We made sure he was aware that how it fits in with the overall authorized federal project and how we're advancing some of the habitat and ecosystem restoration for the remainder of the federal project. Still looking at the same metrics of 2.5 at 7% for at least fiscal year appropriations. And he was not aware of any significant changes to the metrics that OMB is using, at least at this time, although there is lots of talk amongst the Hill with the current administration about some changes, but nothing that they have to share at this point.
Greg, do those same metrics apply to the supplemental?
They
Or
do
is it-
not.
They do not, that's what I thought.
But again, good meeting. He asked some pointed questions, and fortunately, we were able to answer them very directly. So, and that's pretty much the summation of the meetings that I attended, and I'd be happy to turn it over to the board to share whatever information they'd like to on their.
I'm happy to, and I want to take a moment. Mr. Eric Nagy is here with us, and he actually was a co-lead and helped organize and get these meetings together and help work with all of the strategy and the papers, so thank you very much. That's a big effort. That's not just the 3 days. It takes months to get us ready for that. And for us, for WSAC, the project is, important in the whole system. So again, thank you. And I think, Greg, you did a great job summarizing the meetings that I attended, and I attended with you. And I would concur that the National Waterways Conference, I definitely would want us to look into that. And I actually shared my card with the speaker and asked her to get membership information, but one way or other, we'll get that back. And I also was able to attend a separate meeting with Congresswoman Matsui yesterday morning with a kind of leadership group, and I had an opportunity to speak with her just one-on-one for a moment, and talked and thanked her for her support of our project, as well as kind of reminding, I know that we're in a system and we have lots of projects here and they're all important. So I think just being visible with folks in DC is one of the most important things that this is an important project. Please, keep us in mind. We know you don't have all the answers right now, but we're going to keep coming back until we get the money. So I thought it was a much different tone and tenor than it was last year, at least for it was my first time on the flood team last year. I felt more optimistic this year than I did last year. So it was good program. Thanks again.
Okay, well, I had similar experiences. I say ditto on the Waterways Council. I think there would be good benefits there, or just to support what they're doing, because we focus ourselves a lot in appropriations or our projects, but the overall scope of what the Corps does and the policies that are the federal government's brought up that could affect us on all levels, we can't keep track of all that. And that's someone that seems like they have our interests and folks like us in mind, and I think it's worth exploring. On the balance, it was positive. Like you said, we can't get details on that work plan and whatnot, but when you were in the meeting, they know your program, they know right where you're at. You can tell that we're there at the doorstep, and because in previous years, you're told right away that, well, maybe we can accommodate you in this year or something, and that isn't what they're saying right now. So I'm staying positive, and hopeful for sure. Our PED money will be there for us, but who knows? There may be a surprise. I don't know. So, and just like you said, to be back there, they know who we are. I mean, they know the Sacramento region in general, and the fact that we're all there together, presenting our projects and going through them. The paper that was put together this year on, the activities and investments in the Sacramento region was good. I think, like you said, Eric's here. I mean, there used to be however many pages. They consolidated it down. We had a chart and a map, and it seemed that chart and map, we got to keep that up, because that's about all the information they need to know where things are at. So I say good work by everyone, so thank you. So. Okay, with, anything else, Greg?
Yeah, we did have one update
Yeah,
by Paul Dirksen on, that wasn't able to make it to the progress report in time, so he'll just,
Okay.
he'll deliver it in person.
Okay.
It's hot off the presses.
So you may recall, you approved a contract for SES engineers for the remediation of the Time Oil site. One of the things that they had included in their application was the potential to look at a funding program. It's called the Site Cleanup Account Program. It's passed through SB 445. And so I had a conversation with somebody at SES who had already done some applications. She put me in contact with the program folks as well as the deputy. I had a long conversation about the project, where it sits, what it's going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. Last week, Friday, they presented that to their chief deputy, and they came back with an email saying, we'd like to fund the project, we just need to know more about the bankruptcy proceedings. And so the assumption that we're working under right now is that we look poised well for being funded, provided that if there's any proceeds from bankruptcy, it may flow back to the state. So not sure how that's all going to work out, but they wanted their legal folks to look into that. The budget I submitted was all based on what SES engineers calculated for remediation. It's about $600,000 in remediation, $400,000 in contingency. If needed, we'll be running that to ground soon. So I filled out a whole pre-application form this week, and I'm just waiting to hear. The reason we may need a special meeting is so that you can grant authority for Kenrick to enter into an agreement if that's what they're going to come forward with. Timing is of the essence, as you know. Construction on the Time Oil's remediation is supposed to begin in June. So everybody has to be kind of working on all pistons to make this come to fruition, but like I said, the outlook looks favorable.
Okay, so we may have a possibility of a special meeting early in May.
That's right. And the
I
third,
think that sounds, we need to jump on this, so having another meeting sounds important.
and the third and the fifth are both available, so
Okay.
Okay.
we'll get back to you.
And then, no, that's okay, Paul, that's fine. On the possibility of, we have our next scheduled regular meeting would be May 17th, and due to possible conflicts and stuff, I'd like to recommend that we change the date to Tuesday, May 15th.
Yeah. So I think the board needs to make a recommendation, and then, so if I understand you correctly, Chair Ramos, we'd like to change the regularly scheduled meeting for May from the 17th to the 15th of
yes.
May?
Time to be decided at this point.
Okay, and so I think the board needs to actually take a formal action on that.
Yep.
I'll move that change.
And I'll second it. Anyone else? Motion carries. So, anything else?
No, other than if we do need a special meeting, that we'll
Be noticed.
notify the board, and we'll post it appropriately, but, so stay tuned on that. If there is enough time, we may be able to accomplish that at the
May 15th.
rescheduled May 15 meeting, but we'll let you know.
Okay.
Do we need to take action on setting okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Meeting's adjourned.
Okay, your special meeting date was going to be May